Excellent. Bob, I've got a question. Last year, Scarbrough expanded into Mexico with Scarbrough de Mexico, which has been it's been great for us. But, we're dealing in foreign exchange, and the Mexican peso has been very low compared to the U.S. But we also have employees now inside of Mexico. We have employees inside of China. What kinds of services and what should we be looking at as a company paying individuals in different countries? Could we utilize a service like Bannockburn has? And what would that look like, or what could you do for a company like ours?
We do have a number of companies that we work with that are doing payables for employees, be it Mexico or other countries. China is a little bit different. So I take it now you're paying them in US dollars, is that correct?
I'd have to get our accountants on there, but I was just trying to give a live example of because I'm sure there's other companies like ours that pay folks overseas. I'm just trying to give an example to you, with Mexico and China, because that's where we have offices. But right. It could be Europe, it could be South America, and so forth.
What we find is that a number of companies, especially making smaller payments, as an example, and perhaps in US dollars, I think is going to be the presumption. And what we found is that that's a typical situation where banks will charge you a hard fee. Typically, it's somewhere around $40 per transaction or higher to make a US dollar payment overseas. What we've seen is several different companies that we work with come to us and they say, well, we want to pay this amount of dollars, in your case, as Mexican pesos, to this instruction. So what would need to occur is oftentimes the information that you may have and our others may have as well are account information for sending and receiving US dollars. So there would be a little bit of an exploratory endeavor on your side to understand from your employee in Mexico if the account information that you have now can accept Mexican pesos instead of US dollars. And that would be a question you would have to ask. But as soon as we have valid information of the account in Mexico, and there they use something called a CLABE number, C-L-A-B-E, and it's an account number as well as some other information embedded in this CLABE number, provides the banks the information in Mexico to make that payment. So again, we would look, and we have, done a lot of these types of payments, foreign currency to employees in various countries.
Excellent. I got a question here from Paul Gray. It says, you mentioned Brexit. How do you expect the value of the pound to fluctuate compared to the US dollar over the next few years?
Yeah, that's one we hear often. Brexit, as I mentioned earlier, occurred on June 23rd. Just before the referendum, the sterling was trading at about 148. In other words, 1 sterling bought 1.48 US dollars. And then after the referendum vote, it quickly dropped to basically 1.3, which is an amazing move and an example of something where the expectation didn't match the result. So going into the vote, the market expectation was that they would remain, the UK would remain in the EU. And then after the vote, suddenly, all those predictions went out the window. So since the vote, we got down to a low of 1.2875 for the value of the sterling, and we've been fluctuating between that number and just shy of 1.35 ever since. So as we look forward 1 year, 2 years, albeit very difficult to predict accurately, especially that a lot of the work in terms of officially moving the UK away from the EU hasn't even occurred yet. So this period, 1 to 2 years, is kind of the area that I would use to explore and examine the actual movement away from the EU. It's going to take 1, 2, maybe more years to really kind of make this separation. And then along with the separation, there's all important negotiations that have to transpire. The most important of which involves the negotiation between the EU and the UK in terms of trade and everything else. So these are going to be extremely difficult, lengthy, and uncertain in terms of the outcome. So when I think about a prediction of where the sterling's going to trade, I believe it will trade lower over time, but perhaps not as low as some predict. Now, I've seen, some expectations that we could trade down to 120 or 115 over this period of time, and I'm in the camp that perhaps that could happen, but the likelihood, I think, is rather sparse. So I envision, something in the 120s to act as the low through this period of time, and something in the higher 130s to act as the top in this period of time. So what I would say in terms of prediction is more of a range going forward between maybe 125 and 135 in this period of time.
Okay.